Somalia is one of the poorest countries in the world. The 2012 Human Development Index put it among the 5 least developed out of 170 countries. Somalia also contains one of the most overcrowded and densely populated cities on the planet. According to the BorgenProject.org, the city of Mogadishu, Somalia, ranks number 2 on its top 10 list of most overpopulated cities in the world. Mogadishu is the capital of Somalia and has a population of 2.6 million people, and a population density per square kilometer of 28,600. For reference, New York's people per square kilometer is 38,000, with a total population of 8.8 million, and Mexico City is 31,000 per square kilometer. The most densely populated city in the world by a fair margin is Manila in the Philippines. The most overpopulated cities in the world share many challenges, including a lack of resources and high poverty levels. According to ourworldinData.org, an astonishing 68% of people in Somalia are living in extreme poverty, or under a mere $1.9 a day, with 88% of people living under $3.2 a day. This is one of the highest poverty rates in the world. Somalia's life expectancy is 57 years. This is a consequence of famine, disease, and violence. In addition, diseases like malaria continue to harm the population. Many Western countries advise against all travel to Somalia, especially Mogadishu. Most people travel around the capital using taxis, minibuses, and auto rickshaws. Rickshaws are essentially a cheaper version of the taxis and minibuses that scurry around Mogadishu's gridlocked streets. There are around 5,000 young boys living on the streets of Somalia's capital, a trend that seems to have been increasing over the years, mainly due to parents being too poor to provide for them. Medical facilities in Mogadishu are extremely limited. Medical professionals are scarce, and as such, the services that are available are under pressure to meet the needs of the capital's growing population. Somalia was ranked as the lowest in all health indicators, barring life expectancy in the 2001 UN Human Development Report. Nearly 2 million children do not have access to education, and the most recent data indicates that over 1 million Somalis have been displaced within their country due to conflict. These individuals lack adequate access to food, water, and shelter. In 2011, about 260,000 people died from famine in Somalia. Somalia is one of the least developed countries in Africa. Somalia lags behind the rest of Africa when it comes to availability of basic infrastructure. Only around half the country's population has access to fresh drinking water, and this number is significantly lower in rural areas. Moving on to violence, high levels of poverty resulting from almost 2 decades of instability and infighting has caused very high rates of theft and violent crime. Armed militias are known to carry out armed robberies and kidnappings, and there are also frequent outbreaks of tribal violence. Foreign nationals are immediately recognized as potential targets for crimes of this kind. Terrorism is rampant within the country, largely under the Al-Shabaab militia, an affiliate group to Al-Qaeda. Extreme poverty within Somalia has allowed terrorist organizations to thrive. In February of 2016, at least 20 people died in a series of suicide bombings in Mogadishu, the capital of Somalia. Threat levels from terrorism are presently categorized as high, with kidnapping being a particularly prevalent practice. Terrorist attacks in Mogadishu are perceived to be highly likely, especially among Westerners. Speaking now on the history of government, Somalia continues to be challenged with natural disasters along with a lack of political stability and security, which all adds up to the extreme poverty that already affects the country. In fact, the Somali civil war is still ongoing to this day. Beginning in 1991, the conflict grew out of resistance to the military junta. From 1988 to 1990, the Somali armed forces began engaging in combat against various armed rebel groups, and various armed factions began competing for influence in the power vacuum and turmoil that followed, particularly in the south. In 1991, the government collapsed, leaving the country fragmented. Even with the establishment of a new government, conflict continues in southern Somalia, leaving the country in the midst of poverty, famine, and recurring violence. In the absence of a central government, Somalia has become a failed state. The UN withdrew in 1995, having incurred large casualties, and the UN-created police force collapsed. As you can see from this map, the political situation in Somalia remains extremely divided despite the formation of a central government in 2012. The United States and United Kingdom officially support the federal government of Somalia, but Somaliland's self-proclaimed independence has not been officially recognized by any country or international organization. It is a member of the Unrepresented Nations and Peoples Organization, an advocacy group whose members consist of indigenous peoples, minorities, and unrecognized or occupied territories. The disputed territories, which you can see in this map, that are outside of the control of the official internationally recognized federal government of Somalia, are primarily Islamic fundamentalist groups. So essentially you have Islamic fundamentalist groups in conflict with what became the official internationally recognized federal government, which again is backed by the United States and such. So there's a fascinating and rich history of the region, but this is unfortunately beyond the scope of this video. The civil war that broke out in 1991 destroyed much of Somalia's health infrastructure and has not been completely restored since. In 2012, the federal government of Somalia was established, and since then some improvements have been observed. After destruction caused by decades of conflict, a new federal government came to power in Mogadishu according to the guidelines established by the Provisional Constitution in 2012. Quick look at the GDP and economics. Given that agriculture is one of the main sectors anchoring the economy of the nation, the fact that the agricultural sector has experienced a near collapse from a widespread shortage of water and pasture, along with an increase in livestock mortality, it has had an insurmountable effect on the overall country's economy. One of the main effects of the country's history of conflict and political insecurity affecting the country's economy is the destruction of much of the statistical infrastructure and important data. This has created a huge challenge in strategic planning due to the lack of reliable economic and development data. The country's per capita income is around $400. This number is one of the lowest in the region and is a huge reason for poverty in Somalia. Lacking infrastructure in the country affects the number of good jobs and means that most people work on agricultural land. There is some hope, however, for the future of Somalia. For many experts, the capital's economic prospects and potential to be a leader of the new economy is a given since it resides by the longest coastline of mainland Africa, with a prospering private sector and a population dominated by a young labor force and untapped natural wealth.